Hello friends. Today in this video, I am going to be continuing on a prior series and telling the story of Season 5 of How to Get Away with Murder. I have done Seasons 1 through 4, so if you want to check those ones out before watching this one, I will link the videos in the description below. But since it is a rather lengthy season, I will get right to it. Episode 1. Your Funeral. Season 4 ended with a new kid arriving on campus, Gabriel Maddox, and Frank seems to believe he is someone's kid they know. This season starts off with a flash forward at Connor and Oliver's wedding, and while everyone else is inside having a good time, a figure outside stumbling through the snow and blood. Then we jump back to present day where Gabriel attends Annelise's new legal clinic along with the Keating Four. She started her own small clinic because she is still having trouble getting on with any firms because of her malpractice probation. Laurel receives a package of her old baptism dress which believes her mother sent her and she is alive. We still don't know how she got those mysterious scratches on her arm. Frank continues to help Laurel take care of Christopher, and it's clear he wants to be the father, but Laurel is hesitant after everything they've been through. Nate started investigating Bonnie a little more when he found that hidden file Denver had, and he wants to find out who her child is. He sneaks a DNA sample from her, and it comes back a match with Gabriel. Apparently, Gabriel is Bonnie's son. Back at the clinic, Annelise keeps Gabriel and kicks out Asher for some reason. Frank proposes to Laurel, but she says no. Annelise is finally hired on by a law firm, and it is Kaplan and Gold who will fund her small clinic. A man named Emmett Crawford seems to be the only one at Kaplan and Gold that believes in Annelise. Frank plays basketball with Gabriel, and Gabriel tells him it's his funeral. The episode ends with a flash forward at the wedding where Christopher is outside crying, and then Bonnie walks up to someone on the ground and strangles them. Episode 2. Whose blood is that? Frank continues to play basketball with Gabriel, but he's secretly hoping to clone his phone. Over to Annelise, who has picked up a new case for a Muslim woman that is being accused of running over her wife for her green card. Bonnie and Annelise work together to insinuate the original public defender did not do their job correctly, and they uncover that the deceased woman's son was actually responsible because he was against gay marriage and unhappy when his mom left his father for a woman. He is arrested. Laurel tells Emmett and Tegan that her mother is responsible for her father being arrested in Season 1, but little does she know it was actually Tegan who did it. Tegan plays along though. A little later, Emmett tells Annelise she has to take on some different cases that aren't attached to the class action because that isn't making them any money. With nowhere to go, Asher goes to Miller and helps him with his DA's speech, and as a thank you, Miller hires Asher on at the DA's office as an intern. Frank is a sneaky dog, and he starts a relationship with Gabriel's roommate, Elise, and is able to convince her to kick Gabriel out of her apartment. Frank then recommends Wes's apartment as a new place to stay because he has cameras set up there. He believes Gabriel is there for nefarious reasons. Nate investigates the baby DNA a little more, and he learns that the baby was abandoned as a newborn and then kidnapped by a mysterious woman 2 days later. The ending flash forward shows Bonnie taking Christopher to the bathroom, and then Laurel comes to grab him to dance. Michaela then asks Bonnie whose blood is running down her leg, and then she asks Bonnie about Nate and just receives a blank stare from Bonnie. Episode 3. The baby was never dead. Annelise takes Emmett's recommendation and she takes on the case for a CEO that is accused of killing one of his business partners. Oliver uncovers that the CEO's wife was having an affair with said business partner, and that is why he is the #1 suspect. Annelise and Emmett do their best to win the case, but when the CEO takes the stand, it makes him look even more guilty and he is found guilty by the jury. Annelise believes it was really his wife that did it, and he's just protecting her. Not many times do we see Annelise lose a case, but Emmett knows it was his fault for making the CEO take the stand. At the DA's office, Asher tells Miller he used to have a thing with Bonnie, and this makes Miller uncomfortable because he has a thing for her now. Now Miller is second-guessing hiring Asher. Nate confirms that the woman that picked up the baby as a child was in fact Bonnie. Frank breaks into Gabriel's apartment one night, and he finds an ID with Gabriel's picture, but the name is Mark Jackson, which he thinks is suspect. Frank also hires a tech guy to hack Gabriel's laptop so he can see everything he does. Frank really going in on Gabriel. A little later, Nate takes the information he has discovered to Annelise, and she says the woman in the photo isn't Bonnie, it's her sister who picked him up. In the flash forward, Bonnie tells Annelise the blood is from shaving, and then the DJ calls Connor and Oliver to the dance floor, but Oliver is nowhere to be found. Episode 4. It's her kid. Annelise and Nate discuss whether or not they should tell Bonnie that her child is alive because she did give him up in the first place. At the DA's office, Miller and Bonnie make it official, and they have to sign documents for being in a relationship at the same office. Oliver finds out about all the stalker things Frank is doing with Gabriel, and Frank just tells him he looks at every student that is brought into Annelise's circle. Oliver later finds out that Gabriel assaulted a doctor in his past, so maybe he is to be someone they keep an eye on. Kaplan and Gold take on a new candidate, Ruth Stevenson, who is a CEO of a burger chain that is being boycotted due to racist accusations, and she is nasty towards Annelise, which just solidifies the accusations have merit. Tegan tells Annelise to play nice, and her money is just as green as everyone else's. We also learn that Emmett has an ongoing investigation into him by Kaplan and Gold Internal Affairs, and he's not allowed to be alone with any females in the office. Annelise is curious what he did, but he says he can't discuss it. Bonnie goes over to Annelise's house, and she tells Bonnie about her child being Gabriel Maddox, and Bonnie is stunned. But a little later, they learn that the DNA isn't actually a match and Gabriel isn't Bonnie's son after all. The flash forward is 1.5 months later at the wedding, where everyone is wondering where Oliver is because he's not reporting to the dance floor. Michaela calls Nate's phone thinking he may know where Oliver is, and it turns out Bonnie has Nate's phone. Michaela sees Bonnie with it. An hour later, Annelise arrives to her apartment, and she hysterically breaks down on the floor. Episode 5. It was the worst day of my life. This episode focuses on Nate Sr.'s trial that Annelise is doing, and she tries to get him free from prison and into a psychiatric facility and out of prison. He's still being tried for the murder he admitted to doing in prison. He was cleared of the first one in the last season, but still had the second one under his belt. The trial begins and Nate takes the stand, and the prosecution shows the court a letter Nate wrote his father when he was 14, and in the letter, Nate stated he felt safer with his father in prison. The case is looking grim for Nate Sr., so he tells Annelise that he wants to take the stand. He gives a powerful, emotional testimony when Annelise is asking him questions, but when he is cross-examined, they hammer him and it brings out the worst. Annelise thinks they have no chance of winning the case now, so she gives one Hail Mary at the end in her closing arguments on why Nate Sr. deserves to be out of jail and in a safer environment. It actually works, and Nate Sr. is found not guilty by reason of insanity. Elsewhere, Bonnie is struggling with the news she found out in the last episode, and apparently, she believes she had a miscarriage when she was 15 after being assaulted by a man. She passed out while giving birth, and when she woke up, her father told her the baby was dead, but she never saw the baby herself. All of this baby talk is bringing back old memories, and she is mad at Nate for reopening old ones. Bonnie goes with Miller to her sister's house to ask why she picked up the baby 2 days later if the baby was dead. The final flash forward shows Connor searching for Oliver, and he sees Asher making out with his mother. Episode 6. We can find him. The episode opens with a flash forward to the wedding, and Miller is planning on proposing to Bonnie and asks her to meet him outside. Back to the present, Oliver and Connor are still planning their weddings, and their mothers are helping them scope out venues. Oliver has HIV, and Connor tells him he needs to stop hiding and tell his mom and get it over with. Oliver's mom isn't a fan of him being gay, but she knows it isn't going to change. Tegan takes on a new case for a diet pill company, and Laurel is her point person for the case. They work on it together, and Laurel is finally showing some lawyer promise. Miller drops Bonnie off at Julie's and lets Bonnie have some time with her sister alone. Bonnie confronts Julie about the picture, and Julie says their dad told her to and they sold him. Bonnie is stunned they would do this to her. Sometime later, Frank secretly records a conversation Julie had at an NA meeting, and Julie actually buried the baby, not sold it. She finally admits to Bonnie what the truth was, and she buried the baby because their dad was going to sell it, and she didn't want that to happen. The baby was already dead. Annelise meets with Governor Burkhead, and she is offered a job to head a bill that would allocate funds for public defenders and decrease prison population by almost 50%. Burkhead tells Annelise she has 2 days before she needs an answer. Annelise tells her she will be in if she pardons Nate Sr. from his crimes, and he can go free. Not to a psychiatric hospital. Burkhead agrees to the deal. She tells this to Nate, and he'll be home in a week. Nate then calls to tell his dad the good news, but is heartbroken to learn Nate Sr. was killed right before he was about to be transported to a different facility. Episode 7. I Got Played. Annelise is on a mission to find out who killed Nate Sr., but Burkhead wants nothing to do with the bad press that will come with it. He's getting all the blame. Annelise goes to Tegan, and she thinks the governor played her like a fiddle. She thinks the government had him killed. Tegan says to just let it go. Nate convinces Miller to initiate an inquest into his father's death. They do find out that one of the guards was known as very abusive, but they don't know how to prove he killed Nate Sr. Burkhead also tells Annelise that they can no longer continue with the project she had planned because Annelise has too much bad press right now. Annelise threatens her, But then Burkhead tells Annelise she knows about the adoption. This causes Annelise to start drinking again. A few days later, Annelise takes the stand and gives a powerful testimony, but it doesn't sway the jury and they find no criminal negligence involved in Nate Sr.'s death. Annelise begs Emmett to let her have her Kaplan and Gold job back that she quit because she thought she was going to do the project with Burkhead. She tells Emmett she will help him beat his internal affairs accusations if she can come back. He agrees. In the meantime, Gabriel and Michaela have started hooking up and Laurel tells Frank that need to tell Annelise who Gabriel really is. The flash forward shows Bonnie stumbling away from a blood-soaked body in the snow and towards a person, telling them to take the body and leave. Episode 8. I Want to Love You Until the Day I Die. Bonnie and Frank tell Laurel not to tell Annelise the truth about Gabriel, which we are still wanting to know as well. Everyone meets at the rehearsal dinner for the wedding. Annelise asks Bonnie if she can find out from Miller who knew about the transfer date because she feels there was a mole on the inside, and Bonnie says Miller wouldn't do that. He was fighting for Nate Sr. Oliver hacks the prison warden's phone at the request of Michaela, and there was a call from an unlisted number on the day of Nate Sr.'s death, and Nate believes whoever called from that number had his father killed. The following day, Connor and Oliver get married and have a beautiful wedding. Annelise continues to drink throughout and is spiraling. Nate hired a private investigator, and whenever he finds out where the call came from, there is security footage and it shows Miller was the one on the phone. Bonnie realizes he may have actually done it and used her. They meet in the parking lot, and she confronts him about the call. They fight and then she walks off, and then comes in Nate who beats him silly. Bonnie notices Miller isn't behind her, so she goes back outside, and she sees Miller on the ground dying. She then suffocates him to death and instructs Nate on how to get rid of the body. Elsewhere, Frank scoops around Gabriel's apartment, and he finds a birth certificate and then takes it to Annelise at the wedding. Gabriel was Sam Keating's son. When she gets home, Gabriel is there waiting for her. Episode 9. He betrayed us both. Bonnie tells Frank about Miller's murder and what went down. At Annelise's apartment, Gabriel is there searching for answers surrounding Sam's death. He wants to know what happened to his biological father. We start wondering if Gabriel is actually Annelise's child, but flashbacks show Annelise and Sam were having difficulties in their marriage after the tragedy around Christoph's mom because she wanted to adopt him, but Sam didn't. Sam then said he was leaving to visit family, but he was really looking to go see his son, Gabriel Maddox, and Gabriel's mother, Vivian Maddox. Sam had Gabriel before he met Annelise, but never told her about him. They had a bad breakup and Vivian told Sam to stay out of their lives. Sam then met Annelise. Annelise is shocked by all of this. Then comes in Eve, who is an old colleague of Annelise that cares about her very much. Eve gives Frank a copy of an email Sam sent Vivian asking to be a part of Gabriel's life and how he misses Vivian a lot. Vivian wasn't having it though and told Sam to move on with his new life. Laurel tells the other members of the Keating for the truth about Gabriel and how they killed his father in season 1. Nate disposes of Miller's body with the help of Bonnie and Frank. The episode closes with Eve visiting Annelise, and she shows her the email Sam sent to Vivian. Episode 10. Don't Go Dark on Me. Nate, Frank, and Bonnie wonder if they should tell Annelise the truth about Miller. Annelise then phones Frank and tells him to come over with the file he has on Gabriel. Meanwhile, Bonnie and Nate work on their alibis and what they will tell police if they were to get questioned. I mean, they probably will since the DA's death is a pretty big deal and will be heavily investigated. Nate tells Bonnie that Miller had a ring on him when he was killed. Bonnie realizes he was about to propose to her. Over to Gabriel, who is still searching for answers, and he thinks the Keating foreknow what happened to Sam, and they're just trying to avoid telling the truth. I mean, which is true. Frank thinks they need to find some dirt on Gabriel or his mother, so they can blackmail them into being quiet if he were to find out the truth. Oliver discovers Vivian's ex-boyfriend died from an overdose on drugs that she prescribed to him. Back to Bonnie, who tells Asher the truth about Miller and how they need to have Nate's back in all of this. Bonnie wants Asher to be Nate's alibi. Nate beats up the guard that killed his father, so he has a reason for having bruised knuckles and hands when the police ask. Bonnie searches for a recording of the conversation Miller and the warden had over the phone. Gabriel is brought in for questioning because he spoke to Miller on the phone the night he died as well. The Keating Four begin wondering what happened to Miller, and of course Asher's big mouth spills the beans that Nate killed him. Bonnie gets her hands on the recording, and it was just Miller thanking the warden for doing the release early. Miller had nothing to do with Nate Sr.'s death. Episode 11. Be the Martyr. Bonnie shows the recording to Nate, and Annelise, and Nate doesn't think it proves his innocence. He just didn't say anything at that time over the phone. Bonnie thinks he's innocent though. Asher tells Annelise everyone knows the truth now about Miller's death, but they all promise to keep quiet. Tegan tries going forward with a wrongful death suit regarding Nate Sr., but Annelise tells her she doesn't think Nate is worried about that right now. He's more concerned in exposing who did it instead of profiting off of his father's death. Michaela seconds Annelise's reasoning as well. Tegan tells them she'll be there when ready. She knows they'll win. Laurel is pissed at Bonnie when she learns Christopher witnessed her murder Miller. I doubt the baby will remember this when she's older, Laurel. Over to Nate, who discovers that the people doing the case are trying to paint Nate Sr. as a murderer, and he was only killed after trying to steal the guard's gun, and Nate isn't buying it. One jury member says they secretly received proof of it. A little later, Nate meets with the FBI, who take a sample of his DNA in regards to Miller's death. Bonnie is struggling very much after learning she killed Miller, and he was probably innocent and about to propose to her. She tries ending it, but thankfully Frank stops her from doing so. The FBI uses Nate's DNA, and they come to the conclusion that his father did not touch the prison guard's gun, so that narrative is completely false. Nate then believes someone is tampering with the jury behind the scenes because they are receiving false information. Later on, the FBI arrests Gabriel as a suspect in the murder of Miller, and when he gets to the prison, the person he calls is Annelise. Episode 12. We know everything. Annelise goes to the prison to talk to Gabriel, and he tells her that Miller approached him to get information on her. Nate continues to look into Miller's phone records to look for any other calls he may have made to the governor or the prison warden. In court, Gabriel's bail is set at $1 million and is being charged with domestic terrorism. Bonnie visits Miller's mother and tries to see if he had any other connections to the governor. Back to Gabriel, who is offered full immunity if he works with them to take down Annelise for everything she's done. They know she's guilty of numerous murders and crimes, but haven't been able to pin one on her yet. They also tell him they believe Annelise killed his father. He doesn't give an answer. The following day in court, Annelise is able to get the charges dropped when she exposes that the FBI planted false evidence in Gabriel's apartment so they could arrest him. It was a ploy to get him to turn on Annelise. Later on, Annelise tells Gabriel and tells him she believes the governor and Miller colluded to have Nate Sr. murdered before he was free from prison. Gabriel says he will help plant information to expose the truth. Nate then sends an anonymous tip to the police and they find Miller's body, and FBI then goes to the governor's house. The episode closes with everyone discovering a picture Connor's mom posted on social media, and it shows Miller and Nate together at Connor and Oliver's wedding. Episode 13. Where are your parents? Laurel receives a mysterious phone call. Frank goes to Gabriel's house and wants to make amends with him for how he has been with him the last few months, and they all go to Asher's house for a Christmas dinner. Bonnie goes to Miller's funeral and later tells Frank that her period is late, but a pregnancy test shows not pregnant. One of the FBI agents, Claire Telesco, is trying to get Tegan to turn on Annelise and bring her down. While everyone is at their Christmas dinner, the FBI shows up at Asher's house and they have a warrant for Oliver and Connor's wedding pictures, and they also take Oliver's laptop. His laptop that he uses to hack everything. Annelise goes to meet with Telesco face-to-face and air out their differences, but Telesco never shows up to the meeting. A flashback shows that Tegan and Telesco were actually secretly hooking up, but then Tegan used that against Telesco with her superiors and got her removed from the Annelise case. She is backing Annelise in all of it. That's why Telesco didn't show to the meeting with Annelise. A little later, Annelise receives a call from an unknown number and then goes to a church to meet with Governor Burkhead. Burkhead tells Annelise that she didn't have Nate Sr. killed, it was Emmett Crawford. Episode 14. Make me the enemy. Annelise tells this information she just learned to Tegan and how Emmett may have been responsible for everything that went down. Tegan tells Annelise he has a crush on her, and she should use that against him to get some more information out of him. Telesco is even more pissed at Annelise now, and she's not going to stop in her effort to bring Annelise down, even if she isn't working the case. She's trying to flip Laurel for full immunity now. Laurel says she needs time to consider. Annelise tells Nate what she learned, and he feels horrible for Miller, but he now sets his eyes on Emmett and taking him down. They learn that another lawyer secretly visited Nate Sr. in jail when he was alive, and Nate thinks it was Emmett. Connor and Oliver file a motion to get Oliver's computer back from the FBI, and at first they fail, but then they learn the judge that signed the warrant was drunk at the time, so they are able to get it back when the motion is vacated. When they get the laptop back, they see the flowchart Telesco has in her office for Operation Bonfire, which is what they are calling the operation to take Annelise down. Annelise takes Tegan's advice and she goes to dinner with Emmett, but it doesn't go as planned, and he tells her he knows she thinks he killed Nate Sr., but he would never do that. She doesn't know if she should believe him or not. Bonnie, Nate, and Frank finally get their hands on the prison security footage, and the lawyer that visited Nate Sr. in prison wasn't Emmett Crawford. It was Laurel's brother, Xavier Castillo. The episode closes with Laurel receiving a package that appears to contain her mother's missing hair. Episode 15. Please say no one else is dead. Season finale. Flashbacks show that Xavier met with Nate Sr. in hopes of convincing him to fire Annelise, but he said no. Xavier then went to Miller and offered to fund his campaign if he helped bring Annelise down. Man, everyone wants Annelise off the map. Back in present day, Telesco goes to Gabriel and tells him to turn on Annelise or else she will send his mother to jail for killing her ex-boyfriend by overdosing his drugs. He's unsure of what to do. Later on, Emmett is arrested as word got out he killed Miller, and Annelise tells him she will represent him because she knows he is innocent now. The FBI then plays a secret recording of Annelise and Tegan talking in the office about how they think Emmett is guilty. This was before she found out he was innocent. Annelise is unable to represent him now. Tegan then has to come forward, and she tells the FBI how the Castillos are behind everything going on, and she knows because she used to work for them. Emmett is later released. Gabriel tells Michaela about the deal that Telesco offered him, and also how Laurel was offered an immunity deal too. Michaela is wondering why she wasn't approached by the FBI to turn on Annelise. When Michaela confronts Laurel, Laurel says she was never going to turn Annelise or any of them. They don't know whether to believe her, but they do tell the FBI office that Telesco has been going around blackmailing them in exchange for turning in Annelise. Telesco is then let go by the FBI. Frank then threatens the guard that killed Nate Sr., and the guard tells him that Xavier was the one that ordered the hit. Frank decides to keep this quiet and tells Bonnie that Miller ordered the hit because he knows she is feeling guilty enough anyway. So better off letting her think he was guilty. Annelise and Laurel go visit Xavier and tell him that the FBI will be coming for him any day now, and they know all of the truth. After they leave, Xavier calls the governor, and then she goes on television and says Emmett is still the main suspect in Miller's death. The season closes with Annelise and Laurel out walking one day, and then out of nowhere, Laurel disappears. And that is it for Season 5 of How to Get Away with Murder. There is one more season in the show, and I will get that video put out real soon, so I hope you can check that one out as well. Thanks for watching.